Okay, it is 12 noon by my watch, and we like to be prompt. So thank you everyone for joining us today for the School of Continuing Education's webinar on understanding Bitcoin with our presenter Colin Knoll. Everyone, just to let you know, some housekeeping. Everyone's muted when they come in. Please feel free to use the chat panel at the bottom of your screen to communicate, and the question and answer area. We will take questions throughout the presentation. So if something pops up, please put it in the Q&A. So that is the preferred area to manage questions. I'm very happy to introduce today's host, Colin Knowles. So Colin is a business specialist and a very experienced business consultant with experience in industries such as financial services, energy, utilities, startups, and business immigration. He's currently the Director of Strategy at a foreign exchange and global payments company in Canada called Firma Foreign Exchange. And he's also the owner and principal consultant at CKC Global, a global business advisory firm. And without further ado, I'll pass it on to Colin.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sydney, and thanks again to MacEwan for hosting this webinar here. I'm just going to do a quick check. I'm actually curious how many attendees we have. Oh, it looks like we have about 82, so that's awesome. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to presenting. Obviously, this webinar is understanding Bitcoin, so I'm not going into the super deep technical aspects of Bitcoin, but what I will be doing is trying to tailor my presentation here to really apply to like a broad range of people, right? So I'm looking to apply to investors, CEOs, let's say finance professionals who are in compliance or who want to know about crypto, and even just curious people who want to know more about Bitcoin. So that's really the topic for today, understanding Bitcoin. So early today's agenda, I'm going to start the webinar here with chatting about Tesla. Okay, Tesla recently invested $1.5 billion USD into Bitcoin, and it was a landmark event in Bitcoin's history. And I'm going to talk about that. We're going to unpack that. And then we're going to get right into understanding what is Bitcoin. We're going to talk about history of Bitcoin. We're going to talk about what problems does Bitcoin actually solve? What are the different use cases? And then what's next, okay? So that will be about 45 minutes, which is going to be fairly long. So I'm looking for some engagement from everybody. So I'm hoping you can use the chat function if you find something interesting, or if you have a question. I believe there's a Q&A module in Zoom that you can input your questions into, okay? After we do the 45 minutes, we'll do 15 minutes of Q&A, okay? So just pepper me with all the questions you have. So Sydney kind of covered this already, so I'm not going to go too deep into it, but yeah, currently working in the foreign exchange and payments industry. Really fun time. My background, business strategy, entrepreneur at CKC Global, so I own and operate a company, and we help bring investment into Canada, either through business purchase, expansion, or startup. And as well, I'm an instructor at MacEwan, so I teach I teach many courses, project management. I'll be teaching strategic management courses, as well as Bitcoin courses. So I hope everyone signs up after the webinar here, and I'm really looking forward to that. Actually, a really passion project of mine. Now I actually want to know about you guys. So are you investors? Are you CEOs? Are you entrepreneurs? Are you business professionals? Are you accountants, compliance professionals, or are you just curious about Bitcoin? So maybe in the chat box, maybe let's put in the chat box what category you're under. So I'm curious myself. So okay, I'm seeing a lot of curious, CEO, potential investor, investment advisor, retired and curious, okay, accountant, manager of RBC, CEO. Nice. So we have definitely a broad range of people, which is fantastic. Even the maximalist here, it looks like. A fund development manager, maybe an investor. Okay, great. Yeah, I think I do think this presentation will be useful for everyone. Like I said, it's going to be a bit superficial. I'm not going to go too technical, but that will definitely be covered in future courses I teach. Okay. So thanks a lot, everybody. All right. Let's get to it here. Just some ground rules. Talked about it before already, but just use the chat function if you think something's interesting. If questions arise, I believe there's a Q&A module, so use that for questions. And then what I'll do is I kind of like to have presentations that are more of a conversation as opposed to just me presenting the material for 45 minutes. So I'll address some of these questions kind of on the fly during the presentation if you have them. And then some of the questions we'll just leave to the end, okay? So I think that makes sense. Quick disclaimer, I have to say this, this is not financial advice. I'm not providing any investment advice. I'm not telling you to purchase Bitcoin or to even sell Bitcoin. This is literally a presentation where I'm providing information to everyone here today, okay? That's really just my disclaimer. All right, so Bitcoin 101. So name of the asset is Bitcoin. The asset class is it's a digital asset and or a cryptocurrency. Primary use case of Bitcoin is it's electronic money or a digital store of value. The inception date, it was created January 3rd, 2009. So it's only been around for literally like 12 years, which is amazing. And I have a slide later on where you'll see the amount of growth, and I think you'll be amazed by that. Total amount of Bitcoins right now in circulation, it's roughly 18.6 million. And the total amount of Bitcoins that will be minted, let's say, will be 21 million. So there's 2.5 million Bitcoins to mint over time, okay? Unit of account is Satoshis. And there's 1289 Satoshis for every dollar Canadian. That's the market value, okay? So February 8th was really a landmark in Bitcoin. It really started with the purchase of $1.5 billion worth of Bitcoin by Tesla. I think we all know Tesla. We all know famous CEO Elon Musk. And this is just really is an important event in Bitcoin's history because it really started to legitimize Bitcoin as an asset. Many folks have bought and sold Bitcoin, I'm sure, even some here in this call today. But really, this is the purchase of Bitcoin by a major corporation was just really just legitimized the asset in general, right? So it went from 39K USD, the price of Bitcoin. After the purchase, now it's 54K USD. So that's 38% growth, and $570 million that Tesla added to their balance sheet as a result of this purchase. It's just amazing, right? What did they say about it? These are from the official regulatory filings. Well, they said we're buying Bitcoin essentially to further diversify, to maximize our returns on our cash, and we're going to begin accepting Bitcoin as a form of payment. Okay, so translating that, really, Tesla, there was a multitude of reasons why Tesla bought 1.5 billion worth of Bitcoin. For starters, as I mentioned, Tesla is buying an asset that is now seen as legitimate, and that's important. Tesla is a highly innovative company with a founder and CEO that is probably the most ambitious person on the planet. That type of company getting into the space really just tells me that they're at the forefront of innovation when it comes to money technology. So that's another reason why they got in. Okay. In addition, there's a competitive advantage. So getting in early into Bitcoin, that's really that's a signal to me that they're going to build out the ecosystem when it comes to Bitcoin, and that's going to be an advantage for the long term. Okay, and last but not least, really it's about diversification, and it's about managing future macroeconomic uncertainty and future debasement of the US dollar and future inflation, right? So I have these charts here. So you'll see one chart here, which shows the 10-year compounded annual growth rate of major assets. And as you can see here on the left, Bitcoin is by far the best performing asset of the past 10 years. So we're looking at 196% growth over a 10-year period. And then other juggernauts like Tesla, Amazon, for example, 63.6 or 63.8% growth for Tesla and 33.5% growth for Amazon. So just amazing what Bitcoin has been able to accomplish. And given the fact that you typically buy assets that obviously you want the price or the value to go up over time, that's a reason why Tesla purchased Bitcoin on their balance sheet, right? As it relates to inflation, I have this chart here that shows M2 money stock, and not to go too deep into economics, but really a common theory is when you increase your money supply, which is what this chart shows of the U.S. Treasury, typically that results in inflation, just kind of like a common economic theory. And usually during inflationary periods, companies and people and institutions, they want to own assets because assets are safer than holding cash. So henceforth, another reason why Tesla bought $1.5 billion worth of Bitcoin. Okay. So very important. We'll circle back to this nearing the end of the presentation. Okay. All right. So let's get into the history of Bitcoin now, because it's important for us to really understand the history and why it has accomplished what it has accomplished today. Okay. So it started in 2008, was really a perfect storm for financial innovation. I'm showing here a Dow Jones chart that shows that really it's an index that tracks the top 30 companies in commodities. And basically, as you can see here, the price was 14,000 in 2008, and it dropped all the way down to less than 7,000 over the space of a year. So financial destruction. We had U.S. bailing out banks. We had central banks injecting credit and cash into the systems. We had General Motors bailed out. We had just a lot of folks, a lot of individuals lost their homes, lost their businesses, in some cases lost their lives. Just a perfect storm, though, for financial innovation, right? And you'll see that because what happened was there was an anonymous individual named Satoshi Nakamoto, who created a white paper, and he called it Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system, right? So his theory was, and what he relayed in this white paper and in subsequent communications, he expressed the need for a system that does not rely on trusted third parties like banks. He expressed how he lost complete faith in the banking system with this quote: "The central bank must be trusted not to debase the currency, but the history of fiat currencies is full of breaches of that trust." Okay, so what does that really mean? Well, central banks oftentimes, in some countries anyway, as I talked about before, when they increase the money supply, that results in hyperinflation. So as you can see here, Zimbabwe, same type of case where they increased the money supply at a rapid pace that resulted in inflation. Well, it looks like in 2006, they had a daily inflation rate of 98%. So that essentially means if you hold $100, you literally just lost, in one day, you lost 98% of your wealth, which is complete destruction, right? You see the same thing in Argentina, and you saw the same thing in World War I with Germany's hyperinflation. So even a single loaf of bread cost 4.6 million. Like, just amazing, right? That's hyperinflation for you. But this was really the motivation behind the creation of Bitcoin. As I jump back to this slide here, he or it's actually the person is anonymous. We don't know if it's a man or a woman or even a group of people, but Satoshi really did not want third parties or banks to be involved at all in the monetary system or the banking system. And that was one of his primary motives, okay? Does that make sense to everyone? Maybe if it doesn't, shoot me a message in the chat and I can explain it a bit further, all right? So really, he created the Bitcoin network, and what he did was he created a decentralized system that does not rely on third parties literally at all, okay? He created a fixed supply and a stable monetary policy that is not issued by government. So when I say decentralized, I compare that to a centralized system. Now, a centralized system is what we have today, whereby a central bank, so for example, the Bank of Canada, they're essentially, they're the folks that are responsible for putting new money and liquidity into the business environment, right? With the system that that Satoshi created, he created a decentralized. So there's no actor, there's no central party, there's not one person or one actor that can actually print and mint new money, which is, it's pretty amazing, right? He created it in a way that whereby he created a fixed supply of the Bitcoins. So there's only a certain amount of Bitcoins that can be minted basically per day, which is completely different than the centralized approach, whereby the Bank of Canada can do it almost whenever they want. Like there's governance behind it, but they can increase the money supply based on business conditions, right? But with this, it's fixed, it's based off code, and there's only a certain amount that can be minted every day, which makes it very stable, right? He also created a peer-to-peer system. So meaning I, Colin, can send Bitcoin to another party peer-to-peer. So I don't need necessarily a third party like a bank, for example, to conduct that transaction. I can literally just send it from myself to another computer just like that, which again is pretty amazing. And one of the reasons that this is really amazing is because it helps bank the underbanked. Like I have a quote here where it says, currently there are 2 billion people worldwide who cannot access financial services. Well, this essentially solves that problem because you don't necessarily need a bank account because you can send Bitcoin peer to peer. So again, another amazing thing that Satoshi created, just basically by cutting out an intermediary, right? So 2008 to 2020, look at that volatility. If you look at the chart here, you'll note that Bitcoin, the price of Bitcoin here, or the market cap, is very minimal from 2010 to 2000, let's say 16. But right after 2016, it just goes absolutely crazy. Like it goes, I'm going to guess here, 40, 50 times, right? From 2016 to 2017. And then it drops. And then it almost reached kind of halfway of the 2017 top. And this is an old chart, but this is up to around 2020, right? Now, if we look at another chart, 2021, you'll note that the Bitcoin price is way past this 300 billion market cap. It's in the realm of 1 trillion. So since then, it's tripled. So since 2020 ended, it has literally tripled. Okay, which is again just a testament to Bitcoin and how it's getting adopted. Okay. So 2009 was the first ever Bitcoin transaction. And this was 10,000 Bitcoins for 2 large pizzas. So we're talking about each pizza being worth roughly, that's 11 years later, each pizza is worth about $350 million. So pretty expensive pizzas, right? But this was literally the first ever transaction. I think there was a gentleman who was willing to pay 10,000 Bitcoins for another person to send him pizzas, which was just neat, right? So yeah, I wish I would have been that person. I probably wouldn't be here today talking to you. Okay, now what happened in 2011? Bitcoin exchange, a major exchange, Mt. Gox, got hacked. $57 billion worth of Bitcoin was lost or stolen from people. So you can see the depressed looking individuals here saying, oh, Mt. Gox, where's our money? Got hacked. The Bitcoin network didn't get hacked, but the exchange got hacked, okay? So again, that caused a lot of ripples in the Bitcoin network. People weren't willing to trust it quite as much, just resulted in a complete destruction of the price. But what happened? Bitcoin, it's a resilient asset. It was fine. After about a year, okay, people were still buying and selling Bitcoins. So if you look at the chart here, you'll note that Bitcoin price was starting in January 2013. It was around 10 bucks. A year later, it's worth $1,000. Amazing, right? So it almost went up like 600-700 times. Just amazing. And that was 1 year. Okay. 2017, I talked about that a bit earlier, went from 900 to 20,000, which was a 21 times price increase. Okay. And then 2020, COVID hit, right? So we had job losses, we had virus, we had complete shutdowns and lockdowns everywhere in the world. Just again, destruction of plenty of money. Initially, I remember the stock market dropped. I think it was probably 30-40% in a couple of weeks. So a lot of destruction there. So that's really the history of Bitcoin. So just to recap, let's talk about it one more time. So it's created in 2008. 2009 was the first transaction. So 10,000 Bitcoins were exchanged, and the market cap at that point was probably worth, I'm going to guess, maybe 10 to 50 million. Okay. 2011, major hack, tons of 57 billion of value was essentially lost, but it's resilient. It boomed in 2013. It boomed again in 2017, and then COVID hit. Okay. So that's the history. So now let's understand, why on earth are people buying this in the first place? So let's start with understanding what the Bitcoin network is, okay? So the Bitcoin network is the world's first decentralized digital monetary network. So I talked about it before, the fact that it's decentralized, that means that nobody owns it. No single actor can control Bitcoin, okay? Completely decentralized. Digital, so digital versus analog. Analog means physical, like a gold bar. So no, this is not physical. This is a digital network. So we have digital coins. Monetary, that means money. And network means a group of people who join a Bitcoin network. Okay, so it's a decentralized digital monetary network. Or I have some other definitions here just to improve understanding. Or it's a peer-to-peer network where users can send and receive electronic currency known as Bitcoins. So if you look here, we have 6 computers. Any of these people can send Bitcoins to each other if they wanted to, okay? And that's how the Bitcoin network works. There's no central party, there's no third party that can help facilitate a transaction for you. Nope. I can send it to anyone else in the world if I want to, okay? What are some other examples of decentralized systems? I tried to break this down to be pretty simple to understand. So one of them being the internet, which is really a classic case of a decentralized network. And then I have here an ant mound. Now it doesn't necessarily apply with all ants. Like sometimes there's a queen ant, but I was reading that with fire ants, apparently, there is no queen, there is no king. They're all essentially the same, let's say, class, and they're all working towards the same goal, essentially, right? And there's no ranking. There's no alpha, there's no king, queen. Nope, they're all the same rank. Okay, so that's like a decentralized system. Okay. In terms of centralized systems, we have those. That's primarily what we have today. So I relate that to like a Facebook or a Twitter or Reddit. So if you join the Facebook network, all of your data it's on a Facebook server, and Facebook, essentially, they control the network. Therefore, they can control what happens on it, right? Completely different than Bitcoin. Again, going back to the decentralization theme, there is no central authority that owns Bitcoin. Essentially, if you want to look at it like this, everyone owns Bitcoin, the Bitcoin network, okay? Looks like we have a question from Garvin. Let's hear it, Garvin. If you can chat here. I think I should have allowed you to talk there.
Hey, good afternoon. How are you?
Yeah, pretty good, thanks.
Okay, is your university running a special program on Bitcoin or blockchain, like a certificate
Yeah, you
or
bet.
a degree program?
Yeah, I'll talk about that at the end of the webinar, but yes, that's exactly what we're doing.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay. Okay, moving on to, so why is decentralization an important concept? Well, it means that no single actor or entity has control over the network. And that's important because like the other examples I gave before of Zimbabwe and Germany, they had central banks that had the absolute authority to do what they want with the money supply. Therefore, it resulted in hyperinflation. But with Bitcoin, there is no actor or entity that has control of the network that can control anything related to the Bitcoin network, okay? To do anything, you need 51% consensus, okay? Another important theme as it relates to decentralization is the fact that you do not need to pay a third-party intermediary. So as I talked about before, I can send a Bitcoin to another person, let's say in this audience, I can send a Bitcoin to them without an intermediary, right? That's great. It means it's quite more efficient than needing an intermediary to do it for you, okay? In addition to that, there's full transparency of data. So everyone on the network can reach a consensus on what the truth is. That's a bit wordy. Basically what I'm trying to say is every transaction on the Bitcoin and blockchain ledger is it's anonymous, but it's transparent. So I can audit every single transaction. And that means I can trust it. If I know that if I can audit every single transaction, that means that likely it's a trust-based system, right? That's a very important concept, the decentralization, okay? Now, in terms of the other cryptocurrencies, that's not part of the scope of this webinar, but what I will say is a lot of those cryptocurrencies don't have this decentralization aspect of it, okay? So if any of you individuals or business people want to, let's say, buy into any of those, the other cryptocurrencies, make sure that you look at if the coin is decentralized or centralized, because it's quite important, as you know, okay? All right, so how does it work? Well, we have this huge network of people. Now we have about 130 million users, and they all transact with each other, right? So all those transactions are gathered into what's called blocks. And then these miners, we call them Bitcoin miners, and they run these supercomputers, and they gather those transactions into blocks, and then they solve, in the background, they have to solve cryptographic equations. And the first miners that solve that equation, they get all the rewards for that entire block. Then they're issued Bitcoins, okay? So that's how it works. We have exchanges now, so you can buy and sell currency pretty much whenever you want, 24/7, 365 days a year. Individuals can create their own mobile and digital wallets. Businesses can create their own mobile and digital wallets. Anyone in the world can log on to the Bitcoin network, okay? And this is all secured by cryptography, okay? Which ensures that all balances and transactions are safe. Okay, and just a stat to throw out there, folks. The Bitcoin network has had 99.8% uptime, so a completely secure network. Okay, and hasn't had a network failure in 8 years. Okay. So we talked a lot about money so far. Well, what are the different characteristics of Bitcoin? So what's the difference between Bitcoin and fiat money? Okay, so Bitcoin is, as I talked about many times, is a currency created by decentralization. Okay, compare that to fiat currency, which is what we have today. That is currency that is issued by government. Okay, issued by government, so a central authority. Okay, how is it governed? Well, fiat money is governed by a central bank, a central authority. Bitcoin is governed by majority rule. So 51% of people need to agree on something before anything happens to Bitcoin. Okay. Let's go back to Bitcoin. Transactions only involve two parties. There's no intermediary required. I can send it to anyone in the world. With fiat money, an intermediary such as a bank or a payment provider is needed for a transaction. Okay. Again, centralization. Going back to Bitcoin, depending on the network speed, transactions can take minutes. Okay. Now I'm going to say the average would probably be about 10 minutes to do a Bitcoin transaction. Okay. In the banking system, in some cases, a transaction might take days, weeks. I've even heard of months before, depending on the value, right? So we're talking minutes compared to days, weeks, and months. Okay. And finally, there's no chargeback possible. So basically, when I create a Bitcoin transaction, I can't reverse it. Whereby in fiat money, you can reverse it, right? And this is especially prevalent with credit cards and the credit system in general, Visa and MasterCard. Okay, so does that maybe in the chat, does that help everyone understand the characteristics and the difference between Bitcoin and fiat money? Maybe shoot me a yes, yeah, if it's that simple. Okay, perfect. I'm seeing some yeses. That's good. Good. All righty, awesome. All right, let's move on. Okay. So we've talked, well, I've actually talked a lot about what problems does Bitcoin solve. For starters, given the fact that it's peer-to-peer, it really solves a problem of inefficiency. Okay, so I'm looking at here, we have Tammy Kiwatowski, probably butchered that, but that's okay. Tammy, I can send my Bitcoin, let's say, to Tammy in 10 minutes, as I talked about. If I want to send money through banking system, it might take me e-transfer, it might take me a bit longer, but if it's a higher value, let's say $50,000, it might take a day, it might take 2 days, it might take 3 days, or even a week. And if it's cross-border, if Tammy's located in let's say an international country, I might not even be able to send her anything. I might be only able to send her Bitcoin. So it really makes things a lot more efficient, the fact that it's peer-to-peer and you don't have to rely on a third party, right? It's fast and cheap transactions. It's interesting because I do follow the blockchain and Bitcoin on a very regular basis. And I've seen $1 billion worth of value sent to another wallet, and that transaction only cost, no word of a lie, $20. $20. Isn't that unreal? $20. So $1 billion of value for $20. Completely different than the banking industry. That you'd be charged certainly much more. Okay. As I mentioned before, it's borderless. So you can transfer the funds literally at any time, anywhere. and that's an important differentiation. It's also important to understand that it's 24/7, 365 days a year, and that's a true market, right? Whereby the banking system is only really a Monday to Friday type thing, right? Like I pay all my bills, and if I want to do it on the weekend, I have to wait usually a couple of days for it to settle, right? Whereby Bitcoin open 24/7, 365 days a year. It's a true market. And in addition to that, it's stable monetary policy. So there's only a certain amount of Bitcoins that are minted every day. And that's different from a different from, let's say, a currency like the USD, whereby the Federal Reserve can print money or increase the money supply whenever they deem fit based off business conditions. Okay. So I hope, does this make sense to everyone? I know I want to really make sure that everyone understands this. I feel like this is probably one of the key slides of the presentation. Okay. So we're all good. Maybe shoot me a yes again if you don't mind. And if you need any clarification, maybe put something in the chat. Okay. Okay, perfect. I'm seeing lots of yeses. Okay, let's open it up for, I think someone raised their hand. Maybe not now. Maybe they removed their hand. Okay, that's all right. We'll go back to that. Okay. So what has changed with Bitcoin? Why all of a sudden is Bitcoin talked about in the media? Why are people always, why has Bitcoin reached this prominence of now it's worth, what is it, close to $70,000 Canadian? What happened? What changed? Well, institutional adoption from the big players in finance. So I have the logos here of all the top companies in some of the top major financial firms, such as JP Morgan, Fidelity. Those businesses that are worth trillions of dollars, they're investing into Bitcoin. They're now going into Bitcoin. So the big players in financial, they're going into Bitcoin, right? If you look at this Tudor Investments, Paul Tudor Jones is a legendary macroeconomic investor. He even allocated a certain amount of dollars to Bitcoin. So it's really, it's growing in adoption, and it's really becoming more reputable as a store of value. So a safe haven for your funds, whereby your funds won't, let's say, decrease over time, like due to inflation. No, instead, it'll appreciate over time. So people are seeing and using Bitcoin for that purpose, okay? It's also a hedge, as I talked about this a lot, but it's a hedge against currency debasement and inflation. And what's interesting is we've had budget deficits all over the world. So we have governments all over the world running budget deficits now. And the bottom line is all that money, all those trillions of dollars, that needs to flow somewhere, and it's flowing into Bitcoin. Okay. So we have a question here. In your opinion, how far are we from mass adoption? I wish I had a crystal ball, but I do like to make predictions. And I'll say, based on data, I'm going to say 5 to 10 years, probably closer to 10 years. Mass adoption, if it happens. Now, certainly there's no guarantee that this would happen, but the rate at which it is growing, I could see it probably happening around the 8 to 10 year mark. Okay. All right. What else we got here? 2020, I'm not going to talk a lot on this slide. I'm just going to say, look at all the companies here that are prominent. Visa, Shopify, MasterCard, PayPal, JP Morgan, Cash App, Square. These are all companies that are getting involved in Bitcoin in some capacity, right? And that's important to note, because usually in business, you need the big players to jump on board with you, right? You need the governments to jump on board with you, and that's even happening. Okay. I got a question here. Is Bitcoin a good investment for your RSP? I can't provide financial advice. Talk to your advisor on that one, or it's up to you. But what I will say is you can purchase Bitcoin in your RSP through what's called an exchange traded fund. So maybe after the call here, Roxy, just Google BTCC. It's a Bitcoin fund, and that would be a potential avenue for you to invest in Bitcoin. Okay. Morgan asked the question, what about countries that are banning Bitcoin? Do you think Canada will? Nope, I do not think Canada will ban Bitcoin. I also think that I think most of the smart countries will not ban Bitcoin, but they'll get involved with Bitcoin in some capacity, right? It'd be like banning the internet. I don't think it's possible, actually. Okay. Next question: will Bitcoin replace all currencies in the future? Again, I wish I had my crystal ball. To make a prediction, I honestly don't think so. No, I think we'll always have different currencies, but I do think Bitcoin will have a place. Okay. All right. As I talked about before, I referenced all these big companies like Visa and PayPal, for example. Now, if you look at the institutional side of things, in terms of the institutional investors that have large wads of cash, we'll say, we have some legends actually investing in Bitcoin. We have Paul Tudor Jones, who's a legendary investor. We have Stan Druckenmiller. We have a gentleman named Ricardo Salinas Pliego. I'm sure I butchered that a bit, but I think he's number 2 richest Mexican right now. We have Guggenheim hedge fund. We have BlackRock getting involved. I think they're the biggest. They have the most assets under management. We have Mass Mutual. We have an insurance company jumping in. We have Skybridge Cap. We have so many different institutional investors getting involved. Really a testament around. Like this never would have occurred 3 years ago. I doubt any of these folks would have invested 3 years ago. But now people are starting to see the value in Bitcoin, right? Okay, I talked about Bitcoin's dominance as a store of value. Now all I need to do is really show this chart to really show that. 2013 worth, it's trending towards a 0 here, and 7 years later, 60,000, right? And that's USD. So from 0 to 60K USD in roughly 7 years. That's amazing. Okay. 10 years of dominance. So let's look at Bitcoin and let's compare Bitcoin to all the other assets. Okay. So we have here Bitcoin up top here. Okay. So read the column on the far right here. We have 203.5%. And then we have the next best thing being the NASDAQ at 20%. Next best thing, 13.5, which is US large caps, and then US small caps, and then US REITs. So if you would have invested in Bitcoin in 2011, you would have made on average 203.5% per year. If you would have invested in an index like a NASDAQ, for example, you would have made on average 20% per year. All right. So 10 years of dominance, which is, again, just a testament to Bitcoin and the current adoption, really. Okay, let's move on. Next slide here. So we talked a lot about history of Bitcoin. We talked about what problems it solves. What are the other Bitcoin use cases? Well, I really separated into these 5 buckets here, okay? I have it as digital gold. I have it as a store of value. I have it as collateral, a payment rail, and digital cash. Okay. So let me expand on this a bit. Digital gold and store of value. I kind of lump those together. What can you do? What does that mean? Well, you can hold Bitcoin on your balance sheet as an asset. Okay. You can hold, not only can you hold it on your balance sheet as an asset if you're a business person, but it can be exchanged for dollars after. So I can hold Bitcoin. Let's say I own 1 Bitcoin and tomorrow I want to sell it. I can exchange that for roughly today $70,000 Canadian, right? It's also a hedge against macroeconomic uncertainty. So I've talked about, I've built the inflation case. It hedges that. It preserves the value of your capital compared to cash. So your cash over time due to inflation just reduces in value, and your purchasing power reduces. This is just basic economics, whereby in terms of the data, it's shown that the price of Bitcoin has always gone up, or the value of Bitcoin has always gone up. Okay. In addition, if you own Bitcoin, you're really embracing a modern technology, which is amazing, and it can be traded 24/7, 365 days a year. Okay. Any questions about that before we move on? Oh, we have a flood of questions here. Let's go with Reese. Looks like you have, is Bitcoin a better hedge against inflation than gold or silver? Yeah, if you look at the chart side by side there, Reese, if you look at a chart for Bitcoin followed by a chart of gold and silver, you'll note that the price of Bitcoin has really went parabolic compared to gold or silver. Now, gold or silver, they're steady, they're steady eddies, so to speak. They're steady on when you look at the charts, but Bitcoin is like a hockey stick, just goes way up as compared to gold or silver. Okay. What is a good cold storage app? There's a couple of them around. Ledger and Trezor are some good ones. Okay. There's a lot of questions here. Yeah, some of these we'll see at the end. Okay. Thanks for the questions so far too. All right. Payment rail and digital cash. Okay. So as I talked about, you can send and settle your money in 10 minutes. There's also an aspect in terms of if you're a business person, I think Bitcoin is I use the word hip, but maybe trendy is a better word, but it's trendy towards millennials and Gen Z. That's really the bottom line. They're getting used to it. So if you're a business that primary services consumers in this area, you might want to get on the Bitcoin bandwagon in terms of getting it as a payment rail. So folks can pay you in Bitcoin or pay your business in Bitcoin. Okay. There's no banking fees. Literally no banking fees with Bitcoin. Very low transaction fees. So I can send. Like I said before, I've seen millions of dollars and in some cases billions for $20. So very low transaction fees. It's also mobile, so you can send Bitcoins via your mobile, via your cell phone. And then it also gives you a potential to, I say, de-risk your balance sheet and create more value. Really what that means is if you keep accepting Bitcoin from your customers, over time, you build a nice little nest egg. And if the Bitcoin price goes up, the value of your company is going up because Bitcoin's an asset, right? And if the value of your assets are going up, your valuation as a company is going up. Okay. Anurad Shretha, hopefully I got that right. Will Bitcoin price stabilize in the future or remain volatile like today? No one knows. I would say that, in my opinion, it'll always be fairly volatile for the next, let's say, 10 years. I'll give a big range here, 10 to 20 years. I think it'll be volatile. I don't think it'll be as volatile as years past, where you used to lose, like, you could lose 70% of your Bitcoin value in like a month. I don't think it'll be that bad. And I think we've seen evidence of it stabilizing a bit more, but I do think it'll be volatile for sure because we don't have mass adoption. Okay. All right. Collateral. I included some logos here of these companies called BlockFi and Nexo, and these are companies that basically they provide loans for your Bitcoin. So if you hold, let's say a Bitcoin worth 70K Canadian today, you can take out a loan for roughly $35,000. Okay. I've looked into some of the loans and they're a lot like line of credits. The interest rates are around 4 to 6%. Okay. So that's a huge value add, right? So Imagine if you're a business and you're collecting Bitcoin over time, and the market value of Bitcoin is going up, which means your asset price is increasing. That means that you can borrow more money. And if you want to expand, that'd be great, right? You're using your asset to borrow money. Okay. All right. So what's next for Bitcoin? Tough to predict. I did include some pretty neat slides here that I'll get to in a second here. But first and foremost, what I'll say is continued institutional investment in Bitcoin. The narrative around Bitcoin is getting better, I'll say. And I think that there will be continued institutional investment in Bitcoin, okay? I do think that consumers and people all around the world are starting to understand more about what Bitcoin is. Therefore, they're adopting it more. So I think that will continue. I think there will be continued mainstream appeal of Bitcoin because at the end of the day, the world is digital now. It's not necessarily like it was before COVID. I mean, we're all the individuals today, we're doing Zoom calls. All businesses have to have a digital strategy. Therefore, people around the world are used to going around more of the digital path. So I think that appeals to Bitcoin because as I talked about, it's a digital monetary network, right? I think there's going to be a growth in the user base. I think I've seen estimates that 3 million users added per month, which is a lot of users. I think we're at about 130 right now. So that's a lot of users. And yeah, that's really ultimately what I think is next for Bitcoin, okay? Now, look at this chart. Right here on the left here, you'll note that in 1997, the internet had 120 million users. Now, if you compare that to Bitcoin, January 2021, Bitcoin has 135 Bitcoin users. So you can make the statement that Bitcoin is very immature right now, don't get me wrong, but we might, in terms of Bitcoin, it might be at the same level as the internet was in 1997, which is pretty amazing, right? We all use the internet today, pretty much everywhere. That could happen, let's say in 10 to 20 years with Bitcoin. You never know, right? If you look at the chart, you'll see this green chart here. Believe it or not, it's actually growing at a faster rate than the internet was. Okay, and the source of this is a gentleman on Twitter. His handle is Woonomic, so it's WOONOMIC. Okay, so look that gentleman up on Twitter, and you can find more charts like this. But I pulled it from his Twitter. But yeah, so basically, we're at the same, or in terms of Bitcoin, it's at the same level of the internet in 1997, which is pretty amazing, and it's growing at a faster rate. Okay, now that doesn't mean that's going to happen in the future. Obviously, things could happen, but I think the assumption should be that it's going to continue to grow. The network will grow. Okay. All right. Now, what else we got here? Okay, we have Visa. Visa's jumped into Bitcoin. They're helping banks roll out Bitcoin and cryptocurrency buying and trading services. Morgan Stanley, one of the largest U.S. investment banks, they're offering Bitcoin funds to their wealth management clients. That's a good sign, I'd say. We have what's called exchange traded funds. So we have a backlog of 7. We have 8 ETFs, exchange traded funds, that are awaiting approval to basically purchase Bitcoin as their underlying asset. And that means that will increase adoption because people like you and I can purchase these exchange traded funds or ETFs, right? We had another landmark event with Coinbase. It's a cryptocurrency exchange, and they went public on, I believe it was last week, at a valuation of nearly 100 billion. And that 100 billion is, I believe they were in the top 8 when it comes to banks. So they're literally, they're going public, and they're already in the top 8 in terms of market valuation. That should tell you something about where the industry is going. In addition to that, the fact that they're even going public is something to be said. It means that it's becoming more legitimate, because you can't go public if you're running a criminal enterprise, which is a common argument against Bitcoin, that it's for criminals, right? Not the case. In addition to that, another stat here I have is there's a New Zealand, I believe they're a pension fund, and they're called the Kiwi Saver Growth Strategy Fund, and they've allocated 5% of its money to Bitcoin. So pension funds are jumping into Bitcoin. Okay, so just to remind everyone, I'm going to go back to this slide. Visa, so payments company, major payments company getting into Bitcoin. Morgan Stanley, investment bank getting into Bitcoin. Coinbase, an exchange, obviously they're into Bitcoin, they're going public. Pension funds are going into Bitcoin. So as I talked about before, just a lot of financial investment going into Bitcoin, all the big players, okay? Oh, I forgot to talk about this. It was the public companies. We have Tesla, we have Square, we have Coinbase, Acre, MassMutual, MicroStrategy. These are all public companies. All of these companies are buying Bitcoin. Tesla bought 1.5 billion. Square has, I think, 100 to 150 million. MicroStrategy has more than Tesla. MassMutual dumped 100 million into it. Coinbase has about 50 million. Acre has 50 million. All of these companies are jumping into, these are all public companies, all reputable companies. They're jumping into Bitcoin. Okay. Now, in conclusion, Bitcoin's core value really is in the fact that it's decentralized. So I talked about that a lot. It's being seen as a legitimate asset. It's seen absolutely tremendous returns over the past 10 years. And there's plenty of use cases for Bitcoin, not only as an individual, but as a business professional and as a business, okay? So now in terms of my course in the future, I will be instructing, I believe I have 2 so far on the agenda. I have a Bitcoin course and a blockchain course. So what will be covered in that and more will be the fundamentals of Bitcoin, the dynamics of sound money, Bitcoin versus other cryptocurrencies, what are the different strategies for businesses, what are some basics around blockchain and cryptography, and some regulatory and legal and even accounting considerations, okay? Which you'll find out all about that in future courses, okay? And look out for it on June 15th to 29th, or sorry, no, actually, I believe, sorry, I made a mistake, actually. It's June 15th to 29th and 5:30 to 8:30. And after this webinar, I believe MacEwan will be sending out some communications to everyone. If you're interested in the course, you can sign up through that communication, okay? So yeah, just to mention, sorry about that. It's June 15th to 29th, 5:30 to 8:30, okay? You'll learn all about this. All right, I think that, one more slide here. I have a resource slide. So probably one of my favorite books was The Bitcoin Standard. That's a very good book, and Layered Money, as well as please reach out if you're interested and want to know more information. Reach out to the Canadian Blockchain Consortium and Google or look up the nakamotoinstitute.org. Okay. But if you want to start on doing one thing, just do one thing tomorrow. Check out the Bitcoin Standard book. Okay. All right. My course again starts in June 2021. I'm happy to reach out or to connect with anyone on LinkedIn. You can also email me at knowlec3@MacEwan.ca. Okay. And feel free to follow MacEwan University. They're actually quite innovative. They're one of the, I can literally count on one hand the amount of universities that are offering courses on Bitcoin and blockchain. So they're in my eyes, they're leaders. So follow them. on LinkedIn, Instagram, and or Facebook. Okay. All right. I believe that concludes the presentation now. So maybe what I'll do is I'll open the floor for any questions. I guess Sydney, you're going to take care of that, right?
Yes, thank you. First of all, thank you. That was fantastic. I think there's a lot of great information. For anyone who's still here, I realize people probably have to go back to work, but we will send out the recording either tomorrow or early next week. So you will have access to that. And apologies because we did ask people to put questions in the Q&A. There's been a lot of questions coming in. So we'll try to manage it as best we can. So Colin, some of these may have been answered by this point, but there was a question here. Someone's asking about clarification on the connection between investing in Bitcoin and using Bitcoin as a currency. Can you
clarification between investing and using?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can buy Bitcoin as an investment, but just note that if you sell Bitcoin, it's a taxable event. So I compare it to selling a house. Basically, it's a taxable event. In terms of using Bitcoin, you can use it really however you want. You can send Bitcoins to other people, but I don't think it's at the stage right now where it's completely adopted by a lot of businesses. So that I don't think you can pay, you can't necessarily pay using Bitcoin in a lot of places, but certain businesses you can, like for example, Tesla. Okay, does that answer your question? I hope it does. Yeah.
How much money do you need to start an initial investment in Bitcoin?
Is this where I do the Dr. Evil $1 million? No, you can literally start with literally you can start with like $10. You can buy a fraction of a Bitcoin, and even if you save, I actually a friend of mine, she invests about I think it's about $50 a week in Bitcoin. So she's not much money, but you can literally start that low, that small. You can buy a fraction. You can buy like 0.0000008 of a Bitcoin or 0.0009 of Bitcoin, like such a tiny amount of Bitcoin. You can just start with even like $10.
Interesting. Thank you.
Yeah.
How will Revenue Canada track this, and how will it be taxed?
You're supposed to track your if you trade cryptocurrencies. Right now you're supposed to track that on your own, but a lot of the exchanges, they do it for you. So you'll be able to basically through an exchange, they provide all the different transactions, when it occurred, and it's prudent for you once you file your taxes to note that and your taxes. Okay.
And I think we're going to take some live questions. If you want to unmute Karen Farkas, she's had a few questions in the chat,
Sure.
but apparently they've gotten lost.
Yeah. Allowed to talk. Okay, Karen.
Hi.
Hi.
Okay, I had a lot of questions. My first question was, you said a couple of times that one of the differences between Bitcoin and other current and real currencies are that they have a set amount that they issue every day or every month or whatever. So how much is that? How much is issued every day?
900 a day.
900 Bitcoins a day.
You bet.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if
sorry, Karen, one thing, keep in mind, I didn't want to get too technical in the presentation, but they have what's called a halving cycle. So every 4 years, that 900 Bitcoins, it cuts it in half. So the next 4 years would be 450. Does that make sense?
So is that something that you said that the majority of holders can vote on things? So is that something that the holders actually vote on every 4 years?
They can if they want, but no one would change it. Like they can
So
if they
who
want,
set,
but that's never included. That's never included in changes they want to make, because
so
that's the true value of Bitcoin.
who set that? Who set that number? Who
Who
set
set
that number?
Satoshi Nakamoto.
And that's it forever.
Yep, forever. It will never change.
So you said it's okay, the exchange was hacked. So I'm wondering, why is there even an exchange if you said it's peer-to-peer? And how was it hacked? And can it happen again?
Yep. People have created exchanges to make the on-ramp to Bitcoin and the off-ramp to Bitcoin easier. Okay. So yes, there's centralized exchanges, but to increase adoption, these exchanges have been created. Okay.
So you can do it without an exchange?
Yeah, in terms of Bitcoin, like I can, if I wanted to, let's say I'm looking at someone's name here, Abdi. If Abdi wanted me, if Abdi wanted to sell his Bitcoin, let's say he wanted to sell me 1 Bitcoin, and I wired him or I sent him $70,000 Canadian, then we could do that transaction. But exchanges make the process easier. Okay, like they find the buyers and sellers.
So there's no real trail that shows that you own it.
No, there's a trail. There's like you have an address associated with the exchange, and then that shows all the different transactions. But the other example with Abdi, yeah, there might not be a trail per se.
So you said that there's a cost to some of the transactions, and I'm wondering, why do they cost and who gets that transaction cost? Who pockets that?
The Bitcoin miners, because they're the ones that are like solving those cryptographic equations. They're the ones that are gathering and verifying all the different transactions using like supercomputers and software. Therefore, when you think about it, they deserve to get paid for that, right? Because they're investing in the money to do that. Therefore, they should be getting paid for that. Does that make sense?
Well, I don't quite understand the mining, because if a Bitcoin doesn't really exist except electronically, I'm not sure how you mine it. I mean, I understand what you said
Yeah.
about solving equations, but where are those Bitcoins that they are mining for that they get when they solve the equations? Where are they?
Where are the Bitcoin? Well,
Where are
it's
they coming from?
it's in I know it's hard to kind of because we're so used to like a physical world where we can buy things like a gold bar, we can buy a house that's physical, we buy a car, we buy equipment, but those assets, they're in cyberspace and then the blockchain. So
And
Bitcoin,
they're part of the initial ones that were issued way back at the
yeah,
beginning, plus all the extra ones that are issued every day.
you bet. Yeah,
Okay,
these are great questions, by the way, so I appreciate these.
thank you.
Any other questions?
Well, I
You
I
can go on
can't remember
forever.
my other questions.
Hey, that's all good. That's all good. Thanks a lot, Karen.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Karen. Okay, back to you, Sydney.
Someone's asking, so after the total amount is distributed, another lot is created?
After the total amount is distributed, another lot. I don't really understand what that means. Sorry.
I'm not sure if, Carol, if you could sort of clarify that, that would be greatly appreciated. Meanwhile, I'll go on to, how do you find a reliable crypto dealer? It seems like there's a lot of players out there.
Well, first of all, the company I referenced, Coinbase. So they're reputable. They're a public company, right? So they're a reputable company.
And any other advice on how to find them or what to look for when
Oh,
you're
just
finding one?
Google Coinbase. It's that simple. Google Coinbase.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Can you give an example of how I might use Bitcoin to make a purchase in a store?
If the vendor is on the Bitcoin network, then you would literally, I think I had an example in my slides actually. Maybe not though. Basically what you have, like, is everyone familiar with QR codes? Because it's as simple as like you click into a QR code where you'll use your phone and you'll take a picture of a QR code, and then you send that to another address through a QR code, and then the transaction occurs in like 10 minutes. So it's done through mobile.
Okay, thank you.
Hopefully that makes sense. And there's also, like, they have physical cards, like the ecosystem has created cards that you can put your Bitcoin on and just pay via like a chip, like a debit card, for example.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I buy a house with Bitcoin?
You can actually. I was reading a case, I think it was maybe a week or two ago, from a gentleman sold his house in Bitcoin.
Interesting. So that's
Yeah.
next. Okay, thank you.
And by the way, everyone, if you buy Bitcoin, you can also give me some Bitcoin too, just so you know.
Noted.
That'd be great. I'll put my address up. No, I'm joking.
So is this more about sort of investing for future for eventual adoption? Is that sort of what we're seeing right now?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, the stars are aligning, so to speak. Like there's a lot of evidence that's showing that Bitcoin is being adopted. As I had the one slide where I compared it to the internet in 1997. So don't get me wrong, it's got a long way to go. But yes, it is, in my eyes, it is getting adopted because you're seeing all the institutions coming into the space, and that's typically a positive sign, right? And you're also seeing regulators making regulations about it, which is good, which is a good thing. You don't want an unregulated industry all the time. You want a regulated industry, and the regulators are making certain legislation and regulations around Bitcoin, which is a positive thing.
Speaking of regulations, how can it prevent money laundering?
How can it prevent?
Has there been anything around money
There's
laundering?
been some regulations on that. Yeah. Like a lot of the exchanges, for example, they do KYC, which is know your customer. So a lot of in fact, the reputable exchanges all basically do that.
So if the exchange is hacked, is your investment secure, or is it potential that it's
Nope.
gone?
That's the interesting part of Bitcoin. It's if the exchange gets hacked, you could potentially lose your Bitcoin. So that's why I always recommend you either hold it with a trusted third party, a custody provider, or you hold your own Bitcoin.
What makes Bitcoin the hardest money? Hardest was in quotations.
The hardest money. The fact that it's a stable policy, and it's a stable and standard policy. So with money, like when I provided the example of Zimbabwe, basically that happened, that hyperinflation occurred because the central banks essentially just printed and expanded the money supply, leading to massive inflation and devaluation of the currency. There was no governance behind that. They can just do whatever they wanted with it. With Bitcoin, it's the hardest money because they have a standard protocol, only 900 Bitcoins a day right now, only 900 Bitcoins a day, not 901, not 905, not 10,000, 900. And then, as I mentioned, after the 4-year cycle, it goes to 450. So it's the hardest money. The supply is actually dwindling over time, which is good for price.
Okay. What do you think the real inflation rate is?
Oh man,
CPI is a lie, is what they say.
I like the question. I look at. I was getting a bit grumpy the other day looking at some of the charts of the raw materials like lumber and oil, and if you look at all those charts, they're up. Some of them are up 30-40%. Even some of them are up even like 100%. I think the real true inflation rate is based on what you buy. So people typically buy houses. People typically use gasoline for their vehicles. People buy a lot of food. People consume energy, and all those prices are going up. So I'd say the real inflation rate is probably 10 to 20% from COVID. Before that, obviously less, but as a result of COVID, I venture to say 10 to 20%.
How do you hold your own Bitcoin?
There's some vendors available. Just for that person to ask the question, just look up Trezor, Trezor, and Ledger, Ledger.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Who's doing an audit? Is IROC doing it?
IROC?
IROC, yes.
It's the blockchain, the Bitcoin blockchain is auditable by anybody. So anybody who's on the network can audit it. Not IROC, not I don't know if I'm guessing this person works in the financial industry, but if I understand the question correctly, anybody can audit it. Anybody can audit the data. Okay,
thank you. So if the supply dwindles to nothing eventually, then what? There's supply allotments as it's having each year?
Yeah, it'll eventually dwindle to 0. And I think that's in, when is it, 2140, I think it is. So in like 100, maybe 100 years. But think of it like this. Think of it like there's a finite supply of gold in the world. Same thing with Bitcoin. And if there's a finite supply of gold, eventually you wouldn't be able to mine any more gold. So the only thing that would occur would be you'd buy and sell gold off people, right? And same thing would happen with Bitcoin. Eventually it would turn into, there would be no miners. The only thing you would do is just transact with Bitcoin. So you'd buy and sell Bitcoin or transfer it to.
Thank you. And I think
Yeah.
we'll just do 2 more questions and then wrap it up.
Yeah.
What software puts you on the network?
What software puts you, it's Bitcoin. Like basically what I would recommend would for that person, just get involved with Bitcoin by getting on an exchange.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And this last one, I'm not sure if you can answer this because it might be giving financial advice, but they're asking if you had to invest in Bitcoin or gold, which would you choose and why?
Oh gosh.
I don't know if you can answer that.
Well, I'll let you read between the lines. The course today is on Bitcoin, so that's all I'll say.
Okay, noted. All right. Well, thanks everyone for coming. We will be following up either tomorrow or early next week with a recording of this presentation. And thank you, Colin, for sharing all of your knowledge with us. I think we all learned a lot and we really appreciate your time and your knowledge sharing.
Very good, and thanks a lot to everyone too. I hope the presentation was great. And again, reach out to me on LinkedIn or shoot me an email at knowlec3@MacEwan.ca. I'd be happy to hear from you. So thanks a lot, everybody.